Hi, my name is Paul Nuñez. I'm the owner of Lucille's American Cafe. I needed contract law services because I had some investors that were investing in a restaurant that I was opening, and it ended up being a very complicated agreement. You think that it's going to be simple when you agree to terms with investors and you write up a deal and it sounds pretty simple. And then you realize legally it's not so simple, and we needed quite a bit of help to get the documents drawn up to make sure the investors, as well as myself as an operating partner, all felt comfortable with the deal. I knew that I needed an attorney to draw up the agreements, and there were several agreements that we had to draw up with the investors. I think it would have caused a lot of problems that we didn't really think about. So I think, legally people don't really know what their rights are or not. You assume that based on a $250,000 investment, you're going to get, 25% of this company, and quarterly we're going to do distributions and you're going to get your share. And that's kind of how these things are agreed upon. And then when you get right down to the legal minutia, it's like, okay, well, how much money is going to be in the bank account before you're going to do distribution? What's the threshold? Who determines whether the distribution is done or not? What if there's not enough profit for distribution? There needs to be some kind of litmus test. There needs to be, a little bit more clarity. So all parties are really comfortable with the way the agreement is and understand exactly, if A happens and B happens, and if B happens and C happens, versus before we started drawing up the contract, we all thought it seemed very simple. And the more we started discussing all the terms, the more you realize that people weren't on all the same page. It wasn't so simple. There was a lot of difference of opinions, and had the contracts not been drawn up, you realize there will be problems down the road, even if things are going good, So in our case, even with the contracts drawn up, when we started making our quarterly distributions with our investors, there were still questions. We had to go back to the contract and say, hey, no, this is what it says, and this is not what it says. And, oh, I didn't realize that. I thought this. Well, we all signed it. And, once you have a signed contract, people are like, okay, well, I guess that's what it is, So it really kind of just eliminates a lot of issues that you don't foresee, and that was it for me. There were a slew of issues. I don't recall what they are at this moment, but there were a slew of issues that I just did not foresee, I did not think about. And I was really glad that we had those things clarified before we collected the money and started building the restaurant and started moving forward. Or I think I would have had a lot more stress and problems with just unexpected things. She came recommended to me, really. So I kind of called her out of the blue and we met. I didn't feel like I was, on the clock, so to speak, which I think a lot of times happens with attorneys or accountants. You feel like you're on the clock and you're not really sure what you're being billed, and you think that you're going to spend, fill in the blank. You think you're going to spend $2,000 or $3,000 on, drawing up legal deals. And next thing you know, you get a bill for $10,000 from the attorney saying that they put in all these hours, and it can be frustrating from a client standpoint. She became highly recommended. She actually came out to my restaurant and sat there and met with me, which I don't think she has time to do these days. So personally, I felt comfortable with her. And again, the having the flat rate schedule on the projects that she was working on with me made me feel comfortable that I knew I was spending this amount of money to get this result. That's always very nice, because that's not usually what you get with attorneys. Possibly initially, but once I met her and once I said, hey, here's this simple agreement I need you to draw up, and she came back and said, well, it's not so simple because we really need to draw up multiple agreements here. You have multiple investors, you have multiple different investment scenarios. Going through the process of the agreements, having her explain to me why we needed the different agreements, what the different documents meant and why they were there, just right off the bat made me feel very comfortable with her, that she obviously knew a lot more about what she was doing than I did. So I just felt she was very thorough, and just throughout the process, the more I worked with her, the more confidence I gained in her, really. I think it's always been, pretty quick, efficient, straightforward. I think it really just gave, especially for my investors, I think the main result was just getting the peace of mind that they came to the same conclusion that I did. Once the documents were drawn up, that Jessica was very, very thorough, that we had kind of covered all our bases. What happens if the restaurant's successful and we're all making money? And of course, the biggest problem is always what happens if the restaurant fails. Everybody loses their investment. How much do they lose? What happens? For the investors, it gave them the comfort level that they're investing their money and that they were legal terms applied to that. And for me, it gave me, the comfort level that, once we put that document behind us, I could focus on opening that restaurant and doing what I do. Really just not to worry about it. It just allows me to move forward and do what I do. I definitely could see that if I didn't have these contracts drawn up, I don't know what we could have been in some kind of legal dispute already, and instead of running a restaurant, I would be worried about, having legal disputes with my partners, which is terrible. I would tell him what I told him. I mean, I had a friend of mine that is, he has a taco restaurant. He was trying to open up a second one, and he had quite a few leases that were put at him, and leases can be very complicated, and they're generally not written in the favor of the tenant, obviously. So I think that, I said, hey, I know somebody who could, do these lease reviews. I don't know what she'll charge, but I know she'll give you a flat rate. She's going to, probably ask you a bunch of questions, and based on your answers, she'll determine, how much time she'll have to put into your project. The difference is the bills would have just piled up to that amount of money, and then I would have been like, oh, this is what it costs. Great. Not what I expected, versus I knew exactly what to expect. I knew exactly what it was going to cost, and the bill came in pretty much exactly what we thought it would be.